I'm going to talk about the Brahma Viharas, and I've been drawn into this. Um, well, this is what I'm going to talk about, Brahma Viharas. I'm going to talk about my motivation, and I'm going to talk about where they came from a little bit, about the origin, what they are generally, how they're looked at in various Buddhist traditions, then a brief introduction to the four Brahma Viharas, the reasons for practicing them, the traditional sequence of practicing them, and then understanding some of the term is the near enemies of the Brahma Viharas, which I found to be a really interesting. Yeah, I see some people nodding, so you've looked into this of the Brahma Viharas, and then I'll make some closing points. So that sounds like a lot, but and it might be a lot. So I just invite you to enjoy this. Just take it in. You don't have to remember everything, but I'm really interested and encouraged, especially now, to take a look at this, and maybe you will be encouraged as well. But I think if this goes well and if it's interesting, then I may do some more deeper dives into each one of them individually in coming talks. Okay. So a few things motivated me to kind of delve into this. It was the initial proximate kind of intro was Seikai's, who's our Sangha member. They led a meditation on loving kindness with the One Body Sangha last Thursday, and it was loving kindness meditation for rehumanization in a time of crisis, and that was addressing the ICE actions, in Minneapolis. And let's see, is Seikai here? Let's see, are you here, Seikai? No, you're not online today. Okay. It was in response to everything going on in Minneapolis that we're all familiar with, and Seikai lives up in that area in Rochester, Minnesota. So they were really called to lead a meditation, and Gakyo, I wasn't able to attend the meditation, but Gakyo reported back how really, really powerful it was. And in talking with Gakyo and Sokyo in advance of this meditation, because they asked if it was in alignment with what One Body was doing and what Eon was doing, which of course I said it was, I was intrigued, because I did understand loving kindness to be just one of four Brahma Viharas. So I was like, okay, so how did the other ones play in? Is it part of a bigger matter, a larger context of practice? And sure enough, it is. This loving kindness or metta does have other practices that can inform it. So another thing, I've been really called to delve into equanimity, which is the fourth of the Brahma Viharas, as something that I want to help cultivate in myself and also with the Sangha. And that relates to what I started with, the volatility of the world right now and what's likely to be accelerating, disruption and dissolution of support structures. So I'm really called to just practice equanimity. It's like equanimity, we so much need equanimity. That is my intuition is that is perhaps the most important thing we need here. So I actually wanted this talk. In fact, I told Shoen, I think this morning or yesterday, that my talk tonight was going to be on equanimity. And then I started getting into it and I realized, well, it's actually the fourth of the Brahma Viharas, and it's actually has quite a specific relationship to the other Brahma Viharas. So I realized I couldn't look at that in isolation, and I couldn't look at loving kindness in isolation too. I really want to look at all four of them, because I think they all four give the whole picture and the whole weave of practices and heart qualities that I want to bring out and explore right now. So I've done, some practice and study into specifically equanimity and compassion, which are two of the four Brahma Viharas. Loving kindness and sympathetic joy are the other two, and I'll get into that more. But I haven't done much at all with loving kindness and sympathetic joy, but I have done some with compassion and equanimity. And I've done it in the context of the cause to pause teachings that I provided. Some of you know that the Willow Farm, where we do our retreats out in hygiene, was a contemplative caregiving organization, and they ran a training called Cause to Pause for contemplative caregiving for a number of years. And I would lead off that 2-week training program with a half-day session on, the Zen of contemplative caregiving, you could say. And compassion and equanimity were two the big qualities that I wanted to help people bring out there. The teaching that I expressed in that context was that compassion is the trembling in the heart that responds to suffering, and equanimity is the spacious stillness that can allow things to be as they are. And we need both. So we'll talk a little bit more about, specifically what these things are, but we need, in fact, all four, I think, of these Brahma Viharas in order to give us a good emotional grounding and emotional basis. Right? And that, I think, is what's drawn me, more and more into wanting to study these, is that these speak to our emotional intelligence. They give us an emotional foundation. They even give a relational wisdom. And I am going to confess that, my Zen training didn't have a specific focus on relational wisdom and emotional intelligence. It didn't. And I will confess that these are areas that I feel that I can deepen in myself. And I've observed that many accomplished Zen practitioners, who have reached great depth of wisdom in terms of understanding emptiness and really connecting with emptiness. Even teachers, transmitted teachers like myself, can be a little lacking in their relational wisdom and their emotional intelligence, and can have perhaps undeveloped qualities in that area. So I'm humbly wanting to study and deepen, these areas of myself. I'll say a little bit about how these Brahma Viharas have been, focused on in different schools of Buddhism. But I'll say right now, in Zen, it's not explicit. It's considered to be implicit in the practice. Well, yes, and I think I have felt the lack, not fully explored. So join me in making them more explicit, and we can grow together, in this area. Okay, so I've done a little, research into this. AI is really good for this, guys. I gotta say, I used Claude as my preferred AI. That's the Anthropic AI system. And some of you may know they're kind of the major LLMs, the foundational models. Anthropic is the one with the most, I would say, the best values in terms of using AI and what it's all about, and putting protections and guardrails in place. And they've always been that way. Now's a good time to mention that we actually have pulled together the workshop on Buddhist approaches to AI, which I was approached a few months ago by a fellow who is one of the leaders of a group based out in New York. Engaged Buddhists for Ethical AI, I think, is the name of the organization. And at the time, we were trying to put together this workshop back in November, I think it was, and the logistics just didn't work out. The Shambhala Center was not able to kind of pull their stuff together. But we've actually pulled it together now, and we have a date for it. And we're launching it, I think tomorrow, actually, we've got a page on our Eon Zen website, and we've got the room reserved, which is this room. And the leaders will be flying out from New York actually to run the workshop. So it's I wish I knew the date. Is this
26th.
It's the 26th. Thanks, Seiju. Yeah, you're helping put it together. 26th of February, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So it's actually, what's that?
4 o'clock or 4?
Yeah, 4 o'clock on the 26th, which is, I guess, of like
Thursday.
3 Thursdays from now, about 2.5 weeks from now. We'll have that, and it'll be open to the general public, and we'll be holding that here. So that'll be interesting. But so I did use AI, Claude, to do research into the Brahma Viharas, and then some other things, and then I brought in my own understandings and such on it. So these Brahma Viharas actually are very early in the Buddhist pantheon of teachings. In fact, in some form, they predated the Buddhist teachings, but they go back to the very earliest Pali canon. Is these practices or qualities that they're not so much practices as qualities, and they're mentioned extensively in the Pali canon. Why? Why are they so foundational, to Buddhism? Well, they address basic human emotions and relationships. I thought that was interesting. When you think about Buddhism, do your Buddhist practice, does it focus, on human emotions and relationships? Is that the first thing that comes to your mind? Not me. That's not why I got into Buddhism. So I was really happy to hear that. It's like, wow, there's actually basic foundational teachings on human emotions and relationships right at the core of Buddhism. Awesome. They create the ethical and emotional foundation needed for deeper practice. Wow. An emotional foundation for practice. Let's do this thing. Okay. So the literal translation of Brahma Vihara is divine abode or sublime dwelling. And I find this to be really interesting. It's a place. It's a place. Right? So, one way to express it would be there are qualities that make the heart mind a place worth living in. Qualities to cultivate within the heart mind that you are inhabiting moment by moment, day to day. Right? Not an external place, but an internal place. Your own abode. Okay. They're also, you've probably heard them called the immeasurables or infinite minds. And this kind of points to the infinite dimension of these minds, right? Without a limit, extending boundlessly. So that puts in my mind the Bodhisattva vows, right? Numberless creations, inexhaustible delusions. Our Bodhisattva vows, we address ourselves to infinite extension, infinite matters, infinite issues, infinite beings, never ending. So we have to surrender to the infinity of it. Likewise, with these qualities that we cultivate. So these are qualities of heart that we cultivate. They're not just emotions or feelings. They're more like capacities of the heart mind, capacities of the heart mind. I don't like to think of them as practices, and I think particularly with metta, which many of us have heard and practiced. We talked about metta practice, loving kindness practice, right? We think of it as a practice. And there's a way of thinking about and understanding practice, which I think is not a helpful way to think about it. If we think about it as like a method that we're trying to create something, that we're trying to create, something, we can get off base with it. I like to think of them more as qualities of ourselves, intrinsic qualities of our nature that we're cultivating. Right? We're bringing out intrinsic qualities of this abode of our heart mind. Intrinsic qualities, we're kind of bringing them out. We're, if we use the metaphor of a house or a room, maybe they're in the closet or they're covered with dust, or they're not being well taken care of. Right? So, but they're an intrinsic quality of our heart, and I want to bring them out, refine them, beautify them. Right? They're both the path and the fruit of the path. We talked about the paramitas, the bodhisattva virtues, which have this same kind of dual nature, you could say. They are the path and the fruit of the path. Okay? The paramitas are the virtues of the bodhisattva, the qualities of the bodhisattva, and it's also something, so it's something that we're cultivating, but it's something that we already possess. So cultivating them is just bringing them out. Okay. Okay. So a little bit about the way they're addressed in different schools, and I'll just do this really quickly. So in Theravada, they are central meditation practices. They're really specific. They're systematically taught. Right? They're emphasized as concentration practices, which lead to certain wisdom states. And they're also practical tools for daily life and formal meditation. Come the Mahayana, and they're connected to the Bodhisattva ideals. Okay, so they're linked to the aspiration to liberate all beings, with compassion especially emphasized. So that the second of the Brahma Viharas kind of gets a little bit of a primacy, compassion. And then in Zen, they're more implicit, like I said, but they're still present. They're woven into the practice and they're not isolated techniques. So I've just, as I said earlier, I think this can bear a little bit of addressing them specifically. I think, give them specific attention. Our modern life is like full of specializations. So maybe we can just channel that kind of spirit of like really focusing on these aspects to bring them alive. Because I know that we can miss them if we don't focus on them. I have. So. And then in the Tibetan Vajrayana, they're integrated with daily practices and with things like Tonglen practice. Okay. All right, so what are they? We have metta, which is loving kindness, unconditional goodwill toward yourself and others, a wish for all beings to be happy and experience well-being. Phrase would be, may you be happy, safe, healthy, and live with ease. Second one is Karuna, or compassion, a wish for beings to be free from suffering. Different than just wishing them to be happy, but it's specifically for them to be free from suffering. It's actually responding to the actual suffering. So it's actually feeling the actual suffering. There's a feeling quality within compassion, which is different from the feeling quality of loving kindness. The trembling or the quivering of the heart in response to pain. So it's got this active quality of wanting to alleviate suffering. The next is Mudita, sympathetic joy, rejoicing in others' happiness and good fortune. Encounters envy, jealousy, and comparison. So this came up in the description, which totally rang true for me and perhaps will for you. This one is considered one of the most challenging ones in today's world. Why? Because we live in a very competitive culture, number one. So actually we have a lot of messages that tell us we're supposed to be competing with others, which stimulate our envy, jealousy, and competition. But also because we have great systems of power, and there's a lot of abuse of power in the world. And I think it's very, very challenging, to work with this towards figures who we consider to be, cruel, abusive, and abusing their power. And then we get to equanimity, the fourth one. Upekkha is the word. So this is balanced, non-reactive awareness, or spacious stillness, like I said before. So equanimity balances the other three, and it keeps them from becoming their near enemies. And I'll talk about the near enemies in a second. But so it prevents Mettā from becoming attachment. It prevents Karuna, compassion, from becoming pity or overwhelm. And it keeps sympathetic joy from becoming giddiness, is the near enemy. Okay. Hey, I'm going to jump to the near enemies because it's really. I'm going to say more about these near enemies. Okay. So okay, let me do the far enemies. Okay, so the far enemies are, for loving kindness, it's hatred or ill will. For compassion, the far enemy is cruelty. For sympathetic joy, the far enemy is envy. And then for equanimity, the far enemy is anxiety or restlessness. So I wonder, when you hear these, like, do you kind of connect with them? Like, do you feel hatred and ill will in your heart? Do you feel cruelty, that you can be cruel? Do you feel envious a lot? And then anxiety and restlessness? Personally, the only one of those that I really feel, I mean, I know I have the capacity to feel all of those, and I do, but the one that feels most like most activated for me is the final one, which is the anxiety and restlessness. But not the others. So I don't know about you, if you feel like I've got to deal with my own cruelty or my own ill will, and hatred. But it's the near enemies that I think are more things that we should really look out for. The near enemies are actually the qualities that resemble the Brahma Vihara, but they go in the opposite direction. And I kind of think as spiritual practitioners that we all are, we're probably more prone to the near enemies than we are to the far enemies. Yeah, that's the point I wanted to make. So they masquerade as the real thing. And, as with all of this, these aren't bad, but it behooves us to be aware of them, right? So the near enemy of loving kindness is attachment or selfish affection, loving, but with strings attached, conditional loving. This collapses when it isn't reciprocated. Okay, that's not loving kindness. It's conditional affection or self-centered affection. It's possessive, anxious, and needy. Now I'm connecting with it. Yeah, I'm definitely more prone to go into these versions. Okay, so the near enemy of compassion is pity or overwhelm. Oh, is it overwhelm? Yeah, pity or overwhelm. Yeah. Yeah, with the cost of pause, contemplative caregiving. I mean, working with that overwhelm is one of the biggest things in that training, right? Because we want to do compassionate work, compassionate caregiving, and yet when we get overwhelmed, there's something off. And usually it has to do with attachment to outcome, right? Or just becoming so kind of losing your own ground within the work, your own heart center within the work. So this can come from looking down on the sufferer. Okay, so the pity comes from kind of looking down on them, drowning in their pain, and becoming hopeless, overwhelmed, and depleting. Okay, so feeding those aspects. And the near enemy of sympathetic joy is, I've got two more. Comparison-based happiness. Sympathetic joy is supposed to be completely joyful with another person's happiness. Yeah, pretty challenging, huh? Okay. But you can be happy because, well, I'm happy for you, but I'm still ahead. Right? That kind of, oh, I could have had that. Could we really be joyful for them? It could be performative rather than genuine. Oh, I'm so happy for you. God. And then that feeling of threat or insecurity when others surpass you. Okay? That's the real challenge, is to be really joyful in a way that could, threaten your own, ego position in some way. Okay. And then the near enemy of equanimity is indifference or apathy. And I think we can all connect on this, right? Right. This version is like, oh yeah, no, it's good. It's all good. All right. No, it's we're all good. We've got the space here. Yeah. Kind of it's like checking out of the situation, but you're pretending you're balanced. You're not really engaged. you're really cold and numb, right? But you're pretending that you care. You're really not engaged. So this is pretty interesting. I'm gonna decide where to go here. Yeah, here are some tips around recognizing when it's the near enemy, the disguised version of the Brahma Vihara. Right. So the felt quality of the the practice of the quality that we're cultivating with the near enemies, there's a contraction, there's a density, there's a tenseness, there's a heaviness. Whereas the felt sense of the true Brahma Viharas is light and open and radiant. Okay. There's conditionality in the false versions. They depend on circumstances. The true Brahma Viharas are stable. The false versions collapse inward or they scatter outward. The true Brahma Viharas maintain connection without losing your center. Over time, the near enemies deplete and ultimately increase suffering, whereas the true Brahma Viharas are sustainable and nourishing to all involved. These are worth really exploring more. Okay. Yeah, I think the last thing I want to go into, I'm going to drop a few of the sections here, but maybe I'll pick them back up later, is the order, the sequence. And that's the thing that kind of motivated me to kind of go back to the upper level on this, because I wanted to go right to equanimity. And it was like, well, let me look at this. And it's like, as it turns out, there is a sequence in the order that I've talked to them about. So the order is the order that I've talked to them about: loving kindness, then compassion, then sympathetic joy, and then equanimity. Okay, so this is all just, it's not written in stone this way, right? There's reasons to like do things otherwise, but I think there's wisdom in at least thinking about them in this way. So loving kindness comes first because it's the most accessible, it's the most fundamental. It's easier to wish beings to be happy than to work directly with their suffering. Okay, just simpler and easier. Okay, and it creates a warm foundation, preventing other Brahma Viharas from becoming cold. Okay, cold. This is important. There's a warmth there that comes right in. We don't talk about warmth so much in Zen. Okay, so this is good. I like this. And also this reminded me of the fact that dana is the first of the paramitas, right? Dana is about exchange and generosity, and it has the same sort of basis in a warm, loving connection with another being. And all the other ones, all the way up to wisdom, which is the sixth of the paramitas, and those have a sequence too. And it starts with dana, so it starts with, to me, very similar to this, loving kindness. Okay, next we go to compassion, which naturally builds from loving kindness. Okay, so now we want beings to be free from whatever is keeping happiness from them. Okay, so it becomes more active, you could say. And it becomes more feeling of their own pain and your own pain. Okay, that feeling sense kind of starts to magnify and escalate and ignite with some more difficult feelings. Okay. Then we get to sympathetic joy, which flows from both loving kindness, and compassion. So we can really celebrate when beings actually are happy, when they actually have, relieved some of their suffering. Okay, we're in touch with those two things, so then our joy can come from the actualization of those things. And then we get to equanimity, which is the spaciousness for all of the others to unfold. Okay. So the risks of starting elsewhere. So karuna without metta, compassion without loving kindness, kind of turns into its near enemy, burnout, overwhelm, and pity. Sympathetic joy without loving kindness turns into that comparativeness. Okay, you're really focused more on yourself with that joy. And then equanimity without all the others turns into kind of indifference or detachment. It's cold. It's a cold equanimity. It's a cold, like, stability, you could say, and an uncaring. Okay. Okay. The last thing I'm going to say is that those of you who've done the formal metta practice, it usually does direct you to apply the metta in a certain sequence. And I've done these, and I found this to be helpful. So that's the traditional way of working with all of the Brahma Viharas, and it goes in the 5 directions. So you start with yourself, then you go to a benefactor or a loved one, then you go to a good friend, then you go to a neutral person, and then you go to a difficult person, and then you go to all beings everywhere. So there's actually 6 stages there. Sometimes it comes down to 4, but I think this is a good, kind of development, cultivation of the quality, of your abode to kind of move through these. I found that usually the neutral person is harder to cultivate feeling for than the difficult person. Because the difficult person, I've got some sort of juice to work with, but a neutral person, I don't, I can perhaps not care about, or I don't have that emotional juice to it. So to cultivate this feeling for a neutral person is one of the stronger practices for me. And then what it calls me to do is to become more intimate, with them. Right? It's like, why am I neutral towards them? It's a human being with feelings and emotions, and they suffer like all of us, and they're going to die like all of us. So what's my neutrality all about? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I think I'll wrap up here. This was somewhat conceptual, and I kind of covered a landscape around these practices, but these are I think important qualities, and like I said, I kind of worked backwards. I think equanimity is really important, and now I see that these other 3 are like we need to cultivate those in order to make it real equanimity, not a false equanimity. So let's sit for a little bit, and then I'm really interested in your thoughts on this matter, this practice. Thank you.